What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Ham Reviews the LCK. This week is week 3, and it's played on patch 10.12. Unfortunately, not patch 10.13, which is the current LCS patch, but it'll have to do. I'm testing some new mic settings, so if it sounds bad or whatever, let me know, and bear with me as I figure it out. But anyways, jumping straight into it, we got here our top 10 champions played in the LCK. Pretty similar to what was happening in week 2, but there's been a few small changes. The top 5 is pretty much identical, actually. Varus, Karma, Trundle, Ezreal, and Set remain the 5 top pick champions or contested champions. Syndra here at the end has replaced Azir, so this 10th spot seems to be mostly mages who are falling in and out of favor. And then we've seen some small position changes. Varus is overtaking Karma again as the top spot, and then Kalista has slightly overtaken Aphelios. This is the same data, just in a coordinate form. We can see the clustering kind of start to come out here, where TF, Kalista, and Set are down here in this group. Trundle and Ezreal are up here, and then Karma and Varus are clumped together down here. Aphelios, interestingly, doesn't really seem to fit into any of these categories, and I think it's because even though he has a high presence, he hasn't been performing as well. So he's kind of standing off on his own compared to the other guys. And then Yuumi and Syndra are down here. This is pre-nerf Yuumi. So we'll see if next week, when LCK is playing on 10.13, if we see Yuumi drop off out of the top 10. This is actually a new figure that I'm really excited to show with you guys. On the y-axis we have win rate, and on the x-axis we have presence. And I've broken the graph into four quadrants, kind of categorizing the champions based on what I think is their strength in the pro play scene. We have the trash region down here in the bottom left, which is champions that are not really picked and so far have been performing subpar, under 50%. And then we have the sleeper section, which is champions that are not being picked, but they do seem to be performing pretty well. In comparison, on the right side of the graph, we have champions that are being played a lot, and we have overrated, which is champions that are being picked but perhaps aren't doing so well, and we have strong champions that are being picked and they're performing exceedingly well. So there isn't too much to get from this graph because everything needs context. For example, Camille is doing really well, and she isn't being picked a lot, but she's widely considered to be something like an Aatrox counter or a Mord or an Ornn counter. In contrast, Set here is super high on both axes, so I would say Set is just the best champion. You can flex any role, it's really strong. Kalista seems to be outperforming both Ezreal and Aphelios, even though Ezreal and Aphelios are doing significantly better in terms of the number of games being played. And then here in this little core right here, you have kind of staples that are being picked, and they're doing normally well. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more Wukong going over the next couple weeks as pros figure out how to play with him and around him. And yeah. Interestingly, Varus is down here all the way at, I believe this is something like, he's 2 and 4, so it's a pretty low win rate for Varus, but he still has 99% presence. So I would say Varus is actually overrated in that pros are slowly starting to figure that out by picking Ezreal and Kalista and Aphelios. One notable champion that isn't really talked about too much is Kennen. I think Kennen is really good in the current meta because of the flash ult engage. It's just a ton of damage. It synergizes really well with a lot of teamfight comps like Wukong, even though you would probably never play these two champions together unless you're playing something like Senabot. But also with tank junglers like Trundle, it can synergize pretty well. Moving on to first pick, blue and red side, we see it's pretty similar to last week. Mostly AD carries like Kalista, Varus, Aphelios, Ezreal. Some games this week have had interesting, unique first picks. There's been some Wukong, some Set, obviously Trundle and Twisted Fate here, but for the most part, it's still these top 5. On red side, it's actually a lot different from last week. Trundle has been overtaken by Ezreal as the #1 red side pick, combined usually with some kind of jungler like Lee Sin, Olaf, Volibear, and then we've seen some other AD carries like Ashe and Kai'Sa when the other standard AD carries are banned out. jumping straight into some drafts here that I thought were pretty interesting. The first draft here is from Afrika, which is a scaling teamfight comp with some hard engage from Ashe and Bramble. The scale here is really interesting. It's a counter pick to Ornn, and it's just signifying that this team is trying to scale all the way into the late game and then basically team fight with KT Rolster, which proved to be pretty successful for Afrika. This next comp is I would say this is kind of like a brawling, team fighting meatball comp with Sett and Wukong and Pyke diving in and trying to disrupt the enemy backline. And then you have Aphelios and Nidalee kind of standing on the periphery, doing DPS and doing some healing in the case of Nidalee. I think Wadid in the commentary was saying that Nidalee is really considered like a Soraka with a spear, so she has lots of healing and her spears do a lot of damage. Nidalee can also jump in with her empowered leap, so she can follow the other guys pretty easily. Draft 3 here is a teamfight comp that's pretty similar to Draft 2 from Damwon, and they're utilizing Wukong with Pantheon support here as the hard engage kind of dive, and then Zoe serves a kind of similar purpose to Nidalee, where she can have the long range poke with her Power Star, but also the engage with her ult and then the Sleepy Shovel Bubble. And then Ezreal and Trundle are kind of standard picks. This last draft here, we're looking at Varus combined with a bunch of team fighters, and the reason why I picked this draft specifically was because it kind of highlights how Varus is not just a poke champ, so you don't have to play Varus with things like, you know, Zoe or Jace exclusively, or Nidalee. You can play Varus with teamfight comps like Sylas, Syndra, and Thresh, because his ult is just really good for setting up chain follow-ups like with Thresh, or he can ult off of a Syndra pick or a Thresh hook or something like that. And this Sylas here is a great counter pick to Kennen and Ezreal, because he gets a lot of utility out of using these ultimates. But yeah, those are the pretty interesting drafts from this week. In terms of general drafting strategy or meta, it's pretty much the same, where blue side is picking 80 carries, red side is picking 80 carries and jungles, but after the first ban phase and the first pick phase, red side has now swapped to blind picking mid more than top. They're saving the fourth pick for counter pick, and you can see that in some of these drafts. This Kayle was a counter pick to this Ornn. This Mord, I'm not sure if Mord is considered a Wukong counter, but it was picked in counter to Wukong, and this Renekton was picked in counter to the Wukong as well. So this one game is actually where they picked support counter instead of top. But just some general comments here. There's no longer any champs that have 100% presence. You know, rest in peace Varus and Karma, although 99 to 97% aren't that far off. The 10th phase spot is being replaced by mages in the mid lane. We actually saw 4 more Varus games and was performing pretty poorly. So I still think that Varus is overrated, and Kalista is the true secret OP, well, maybe not so secret OP AD carry right now. Other than that, yeah, Sett continues to have a high ban rate and high presence, and most teams are now using they'd rather counter pick top than mid. Here's that figure from last time, just updated for this week, and we can see the new interesting addition is the rise of this small cluster here that I would consider middle of the pack champions. So these are champions that are just starting to see a little bit more play, a little bit more picks, and these are things like Zoe, Ornn, Lee Sin, like Jace. These are like standard kind of like strong champions, but maybe aren't, you know, as good as like Trundle and Ezreal, which are up here, or Varus and Karma, which would be over here. But I think as time progresses throughout the summer, we'll see these champions slowly start to merge into the strong pick section. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Yeah, see ya and have a nice day.